That's later now. They just do it when they're setting it up. And I'm live and you're not getting anything. That's interesting. Let's see if we can see anybody there. That's weird.
Try to refresh it.
Otherwise, there we are. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello. Thanks for joining. We're going to do a class today, a teaching on the one and the two, the absolute and the relative. So let's start with some mantra just to tune in. Okay. We'll start with 3 ohms. Ganesha mantras for the right channel, Saraswati mantras for the left channel, and Guru mantras for the central. Om Ganganapate Namaha, Om Ganganapate Namaha, Om Ganganapate Namaha, Om Aing Saraswatya Namaha, Om Aing Saraswatya Namaha, Om Aing Saraswatya Namaha, Om Shring Hring Machandanataya Namaha, Om Shring Hring Machandanataya Namaha, Om Shring Hring Machandanataya Namaha. Okay, so here we go. This is an advanced class in view training. Some of this class may be difficult for a beginner to follow. That doesn't mean they shouldn't try. It's good training. What I suggest is that you watch this class maybe 5-6 times over the next 2 years, something like that, if you're new to the school, new to the system, new to Trikonasana yoga or any non-dual system of meditation and yoga. If you feel agitated at being confused while watching, you have to just remember that within this view, within the view that your base hosts everything, the base of your essence that you are hosts both confusion and clarity, and everything is okay. Okay? So don't grasp at confusion, don't grasp at clarity. Just take it in, sit with it, try to stay with it as best you can, but don't let your mind get too stuck where you stay back in the past while we're talking, while we're still keeping the class rolling, okay? Right. We're going to try to do an hour class with a half hour of question and answer period if that much time is needed. We allotted 2 class periods for this topic, knowing that it's a huge topic. It might be that it just naturally wraps up within this first hour when we have a question and answer, and the next class will be on something else, but we'll see how that works out. Let's just leave it live in that way, okay? Okay. Now, learning non-dual view, entering into non-dual Shaivism, Dzogchen, Vajrayana, Zen, any of those, heavy-duty non-dual schools, even Vedanta to a degree, right? It creates certain problems for us living in the world, right? Especially when we over-focus on non-duality. It's a common problem. I see it a lot with practitioners, right? Immediately, it puts you at a distance to your already present, uncreated base nature, right? When you learn non-dual view, it immediately puts you at a distance to it. Just using your mind to try to apprehend non-duality puts you into your mind and removes you to a certain degree from directly experiencing who you are. So it puts us into more of a mental cogitation place. It takes us out of what we are really. Not that we're in it all the time anyway, but we have to study it. The trick is not to make the meaning out of it and the words we use about it a substitute for the real experience, right? So it's the philosopher's dilemma, right? Practitioners don't have this much of a problem about this, but the philosophers have a serious problem with this. The point is often made, especially in Shaivism, that to generate and follow vikalpas, or thought constructs, back into our base is to refine ourselves directly into essence. It's a nice theory, but in application, in practicality, the mind simply becomes more attached to the refined vikalpas, what we would call states of consciousness that are super refined. And misidentifying those states of consciousness that are actually very, very, very super refined vikalpas or states of consciousness, subtle states, missing that and misidentifying them as the base itself means we're in delusion still. We haven't attained compassion and wisdom of our essential nature, and we can't tell where we are actually. But these states are so seductive that people don't realize this. That's the problem. They're so refined. That's why we need constant view study, constant practice. And just to throw a nugget out there, what I would always do in meditation for years and years and years and still do, I'll just pose the question in a feeling sense, not words or anything. When I'm deep in meditation, I'll say, is this all there is? In other words, like, what am I grasping? But it's very softly, is this all there is? And sometimes, boom, it all opens up again. And I realize, there was some kind of grasping, subtle grasping going on, see? Okay. So in application, the mind really is becoming attached to these refined vikalpas about the base until the thinker no longer recognizes they're having these subtle thoughts about the base, or that they're base-like, right? And then they take on a role of being more base-like instead of base, right? So base is the term I'm using for the absolute here. We'll get into that in a minute. Right now we're discussing problems that are created by just learning and diving into such an amazing, profound view of non-duality or absolute reality, okay? Also, studying like this can make us feel conflicted as to how to practice non-duality. It seems to go contrary to everything else we're learning. When we read non-dual teachings, when we read the highest level teachings of Ramana Maharishi or Dzogchen masters or something like that, and you read, there's nothing to do, just simply be who you are. And then your teacher, who works with you day to day is telling you, do this meditation, do that meditation, breathe like this, put your posture like that, use your gaze like this, use these mantras. It can put us into a kind of conflict inside. Well, the absolute view says this, and then the relative view says, do this practice. So I get conflicted, The no effort versus effort situation, the no study versus study, or the no goal versus clear and strong goals in practice. What do I do? Okay, so we can get inner conflict as we start to understand this view. Because we live in a world of duality, our mind is a product of this duality, so it loves making conflict. If it can't rationally, logically understand the two things together, one has to be false. So people will pursue just absolute practice and then fall, or pursue only progressional practice, relative practice, without a non-dual view and fall, right? Not make it. So this is how this can happen. It seems that non-duality can't be practiced. This is another thing, per se. So there's not really anything to do. This is another issue or problem that comes with learning non-dual view, especially when you're learning it from people who are realized to such a high degree that they just tell you this all the time. That's all they're teaching, basically, is, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to practice. You don't need to study. Just be who you are right now as you are. And then you go, okay, I'm doing that. And they go, okay, that's all there is. So this creates a serious problem. It's not in reality at all. I'm not saying those great masters are wrong. They're absolutely correct. But they're just not dealing with any more of the relative world. They've been there, done that. They're sitting in a different place. And they're really living as a constant icon or a standard, a measuring stick, something that we can bounce off of to see like, oh yeah, maybe I'm trying too much with ambition here and I can relax a bit. But to take those advices literally, that there's nothing we need to do, it takes out the whole practical reality that there really is something to do. Okay. So because when you take the advice that there's nothing to do, I just relax into my nature, you realize I don't have realization of my essence just by doing that, right? I have it every time I did Yoga Nidra. You can't get more relaxed than you can be in Yoga Nidra. But yet everybody, is not recognizing their nature in Yoga Nidra, very few. So I think there's a lot of problems that people have today trying to discern and assess for themselves what is absolute consciousness, the absolute view, and am I actually touching it, experiencing it? It's shocking to me as a traditional teacher. It's shocking to me that how many people write on the internet that they're in their base, they're in their realization of their essence nature all day long. It means you really know nothing about the teachings at all, or the practices if you say that, because that's an extraordinary practitioner who's like stage, 10 or so. Okay. So how does actual, real, non-dual, absolute level, absolute view practice work? Okay, we'll get into that. So now that we set up the stage for why we need this teaching, let's have a look at it a bit deeper, okay? The absolute. Let's try to talk about defining the absolute. Because the absolute, the base, I call the base Anuttara, Dharma, Tao, these are all the same actually. These are very difficult words. Words can never describe, concepts I should say, or experiences. Words never can describe that which exists beyond the dimension of the words. Words can never describe that which exists beyond the dimension of thought. Words can never describe that which exists beyond a dimension of experiences. And that's all we have in our mind. Words, thoughts, experiences, states of consciousness, thoughts and words. So actually, really, you just can never define what absolute really means. And every time we do that, the mind goes into some kind of grasping. But then as a convention, to make it easy, we often say, well, it can only be known via negativa. So instead of trying to define what absolute actually is and nail it down, like we say, here's a bell. So if I'm going to define this bell, well, the bell was made in Bali. It's made from 5 metals that are put together in an alchemical process. It's got the Vajra on top, blah, blah. I could describe, but a lot of other bells could fall into that category. But the more I nail it down, or the one I'm holding right now, that kind of defines it, right? Can't do that with the absolute because it's not an object. So it can't be defined. So we go into via negativa. We would say, this bell, if I can't see it, is not an elephant. It's not the ocean. It's not, blah, blah, blah. Just try to describe it a long way around, but you never really point at it, do you? So technically, this doesn't really work because you can't define the base or the absolute. It's a mystery to our third dimensional consciousness, period. When you say what it isn't, you're still not saying what it is. And knowing what it isn't is very useful. It's like we said, it's not a state of consciousness. It's not a state. Waking is a state. Dreaming is a state. Sleeping is a state. But then when people talk about, I entered the fourth state, well, you don't enter it because there's nothing to enter. So that's a state too. You're fooling yourself. I entered my Shiva nature. No, you're fooling yourself. Oh, Shiva nature entered Shaktipata. I received it. It pierced me. It got into me. And I go, no, it's not it. So it's very difficult to define with these kind of words. But we have to try to understand what it isn't so that we can point out where our mind may be grasping so that we're not really understanding what absolute means. Base can only be apprehended by itself. This is a very interesting teaching. Base can only be apprehended by itself. Absolute consciousness, base, whatever you want to call it. I don't even like to call it consciousness because that right away is getting in trouble. I'd rather say consciousness is hosted by the base or the absolute. Here's an old saying from the yoga tradition. It takes Shiva to know Shiva. It takes Shiva to know Shiva. Meaning it takes a person who's in the absolute experience of their own essence to recognize the experience of absolute and their own essence. The first time I heard that, I was like, well, that's not fair. because it leaves all of us out. So if we don't know our essence, we can't realize our essence. It's a catch-22. It seems like the whole, thing would just be people who are realizing themselves going around, and people who aren't realized never having a chance to realize their nature. So it's kind of strange. So what it's really pointing to, though, this little yoga phrase, it takes Shiva to know Shiva, is that we have to shift gears. We have to shift out of our normal mentality, out of trying to experience through the mind, into a different capacity that's already inherent within us, that doesn't need to be developed. That shift can be made, and then Shiva recognizes Shiva, or Absolute recognizes Absolute, or the Dharma recognizes the Dharma, or the Tao recognizes the Tao, any way you want to say it. In Mahabharata, when I was reading it one day, I had a huge shock, where it says, basically, I'll paraphrase, Shiva, or Essence Absolute, via Shiva, recognizes Shiva. I was like, whoa, did I just read that in this nice old myth about the human struggle? And it was fascinating. I said, wow, Shiva, via Shiva, recognizes Shiva. So Shiva, not disconnected from anything, all one already, via its own self, recognizes its own self without a reflexive second or an object being created. I remember reading that thinking, that's it. It just kind of put me in the state for a moment. The original author, Veda Vyas, gave me a transmission, I guess. But it's just amazing. It's a beautiful line. It sums it up again. But it sounds like poetic gobbledygook to people that are first starting out on the path or haven't had a lot of deeper meditational experiences where the subject-object differentiation of awareness, aware of an object, has dissolved into awareness with a capital A, and there's nothing else. Right? So that sounds like that until you've had more of that experience. But this is the truth of it, that the base can only be apprehended by itself. Okay? So the importance of correct orientation during practice sessions has to be made. Later on, we'll see why we need dualistic practice, but now we know why relative practice must have absolute view. We have to have this absolute view because a mind in dualism can never recognize the essence nature of non-dual or absolute. So that means that we have to practice in a relative way, using our relative dualistic mind, but we have to keep a different view. We have to keep an absolute view while we do that. And we'll get into that in more detail later when we say, how do you do this? Right now, we're just setting it all up. Later, we'll talk about how to do it. So since the base, absolute, whatever, can't be seen, can't be defined or known by the mind, can't be defined with words, can't be described accurately with words, and really can't be known by the limited mind, because this limited mind is only existing due to subject-object diversification. So if that goes away, this limited mind is gone, so it can't comprehend the base. Then how do we know there's an absolute? How do we know there's a base? So before we talk about how to balance base or absolute and relative practice and relative view, have you taken a few steps back first and seen whether you just accepted on someone's testimony or in a book you read that there is this base, there is this absolute? How do you know? How do you check? If you can't describe it, if you can't see it, if you can't touch it, you can't taste it, you can't describe it with words, how do you know? So the way that the ancients would say that they discovered that there was a base there, there's many different ways you can say it, but the way they said it was, when you see the underlying cycles and forces of the base, the underlying forces and cycles of this manifested world that the base is producing out of its own nature to have energy and manifestation, you see that the absolute energy through the world is manifesting in these cycles. So what we're actually observing is the interrelated cycles, right? How does that work? Well, cycles here doesn't really mean like only weather or recurring manifestations like that, like every year it comes back to summer or something like that. Though these are included, or like birth, life, death, birth, life, death. These cycles are included in the sense of the term cycle, but it's much larger than that. They can demonstrate the base, of course, but cycles here means a little bit more directly the discernible way that the base appears in our third dimensional experience. So what way does the base kind of influence or reflect into our world that we infer, there's a base from these cycles, from this manifestation? It's like the base is always dropping breadcrumbs, dropping little breadcrumbs, leading us beyond our third dimensional perceptions, beyond our limited, constricted views of things the way we think they are, the way we experience them, into something beyond this third dimension and its hardened boundaries and limits. So how do we know there's a base? Because we realize that there are cycles that are supported by this base that resolve back into this base but keep reappearing over and over again. There has to be some way that there's spaciousness for those cycles to keep reappearing, right? Otherwise, like the base is space, basically, from this perspective. Right? Otherwise, how could these cycles keep reappearing? So this is the way that the ancients attempted to understand that there was a base, or observed that there was probably a base behind all these cycles. And then over centuries and centuries and centuries, many ways to talk about that were developed. So through these means or manifestations, we begin to see repeating patterns or cycles that are two steps removed from the base, or from the absolute. In other words, the absolute base then produces out of its potentiality to manifest unseen cycles of energy, or laws of nature, or laws of energy, or cyclic returns, basically, right? And it's right, nothing's manifested yet. These are just the energy template behind the actual manifestation of the cycle itself. They kind of spontaneously arise and resolve, and the world then is manifested out of that. So you have the base and your unseen cycles below, manifesting out of the base, but still it's not the seen world of form yet. And you have the world of manifestation then flows out from that, and then is resolved again back to the base. So humans have developed many, many tools to peer into the laws that operate below the level of manifestation. And this has given them an appreciation for the base, an appreciation by close association, not by definition, an appreciation by sliding out of the conceptual mind and into the direct experience of the base or absolute, which we are, right? But not by definition, but not by awareness of an object. And what are these kind of technologies that we've developed, tools that we've developed? Well, things like astrology and Vastu. In the hands of an astrologer who's just trained in the rules of astrology, you have a tool that can function in an okay way, but that astrologer is not really connecting to the laws of the universe below the manifestation that they're reading for. This is why, it's a tool to go into the base. Astrology is a really great tool to go in and discover the base. But few astrologers have reached stages 7 or 8 where real reading takes place, really goes deep, because they're now tapping into the live experience of the unseen cycles of nature, energy, laws, etc., that arise from the base continually and resolve into it, but then reflexively, like in a mirror, reflect reality. And we see reality there. So that's what astrology was really meant to do. Okay, Vastu, the same thing. The way we understand land formations and buildings on land and how to make them harmonious and so forth. Omenology is another technology, helps us understand and see the unseen laws underneath everything. Energetic medicine, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, models that understand, again, this middle layer from the base or absolute, this middle layer of manifestation of law of energy and the manifested world. And medicine models that are very well developed over thousands and thousands of years, like Chinese medicine, Taoist medicine, better term for it, and Ayurveda, have a way to interact with the patient and the environment as a revelation of the greater laws or cycles of nature, manifesting within the person as illness, as misalignment with heaven and earth, basically, instead of just seeing a physical symptom and chasing that around like modern medicine does, right? Okay. So it's another way to peer inside. Even political, social movements and cycles can be seen this way. I looked at many, many repeating political movements, repeating social movements. And sure, you could say they're due to psychology, they're due to religion, or they're due to economics, all these kind of things, natural disasters. You can make all these different kind of reasons for it. But when you see that these cycles keep repeating over and over and over and over, there's some base cyclic energy pushing them, forces of nature pushing them behind it all that arises from the base and goes back to the base. Even engineering, right? You can even look like the sciences, the knowledge behind manifestation, even understanding engineering and be able to produce beautifully engineered buildings and so forth. There are mathematical principles and engineering principles and physics behind all this that allows us to manifest, right? So there's those behind that. The same thing behind mountains that manifest naturally, or coral beds or whatever. There's always this way that everything is following these templates that arise and dissolve back into essence. So mathematics is a language of this as well, a way to describe this transitional space, physics, so on and so on, including direct intuition, including directly from the base. You can have direct intuition of these laws and boom, you can put them into effect and see that they work. This is basically what the ancient rishis did, the great sages of China did a long time ago. All the great sages of the world were seers. That's why rishi means seer. So they were seeing this unseen level between base and manifestation, between absolute and manifestation. Anyway, so that's how we knew that these laws were there, because once we took the laws, once the rishis saw the cycles manifested in nature and they drew it back into the cyclic base of it, they took it away from the manifestation and said, what's driving that? They were able to create like a formula. You could say like a mathematical formula theory that says, well, this is showing up all the time. This must be true, this cycle. And then they would predict. And these predictions were accurate. And these cycles showed to be themselves true this way. This is how people got to that kind of information. Okay. The question is then, how can we directly cultivate our essential relationship with the base? Now, here comes a good question. And we'll talk about this first, how to directly cultivate your relationship with the base in your spiritual practice before you're enlightened. Obviously, you don't have to worry about that once you're enlightened. Before we talk about how to balance absolute practice and relative practice, or practice on the base and practice on the manifested experience of duality in our mind and our energy and our body. First, we'll talk about how to practice on the base directly, okay? The first and foremost practice, which is probably going to blow your mind, first, if you haven't really contemplated deeply or been trained in this type of thought, which I had a lot of training in it and practice in it, and it's very powerful. Maybe this one could be pulled right here so that it's not, yeah. If you can get up to the middle there, it's going to stop that on my glasses, and maybe people won't be bugged out by that. Thank you. All the way up to that. All the way up to that. I think it's got to go all the way there now, but can you pull the one behind it? Or see, look up. It's not being stretched out. Look up. You got a lot more to go. There we go. Thanks. Okay. Hopefully that's a little easier on your eyes. I don't know, is that easier or worse? Okay. Anyway, conduct is one of the most direct and powerful ways to work with the base. And you're thinking, what? Controlling my behavior? Well, control is one way to look at it. We might really see it in terms of working actively with it and releasing unnatural, releasing inappropriate behavior. That may be more to the point. So since base is ever present, you're not creating it. You're not generating that base. What you're doing is harmonizing yourself with that base. You're becoming congruous with that base, okay? For a long time, like I just said, the sages like rishis and Taoist sages and so forth, all the great sages in the world of humanity, in the history of humanity, figured out that humans occupy this interesting place between the unseen heavens, and the manifested world, earth. That's really what that means. And why? Because we're able to intuit that unseen world and alter the manifestation. And taken full tilt, we're able to actually take our own manifestation back to the unseen world with conscious control, right? Which normal living beings who don't have dharma and so forth can't do. So the rishis and sages have understood that the greatest way to affect this harmony, to affect this unity, is through conduct. And epidemics like you see going on right now, or pandemics like you see going on right now, this class was made during the coronavirus first round of this big pandemic, are basically a misalignment. The ancient sages would say this is a misalignment with nature. It's not that nature doesn't have natural disasters like tsunamis and earthquakes and so on. It does. But what we're experiencing now, where it affects humanity in this way, is seen not as a punishment from some creator God, and not as like a misstep that we did, now we're being punished. And it's purely a natural law. We broke away from conduct which was in line with our nature by applying our will to kind of overcome nature and bend nature to our will. And then this is what we get. We get these kind of problems. This is what the ancient sages, this is what Ayurveda, old Taoism, Tantra, all these old traditions, old Veda, they all say this is where these type of illnesses come from on a macro level. On a micro level, we obviously get ill because we also leave our natural and appropriate appetites and behaviors. You know, our senses make unnatural contact with the objects of the senses. We eat too much. We don't need to eat that much. So it's an unnatural contact of the senses with the objects. If we were really being present, really listening, tasting, feeling, digesting, we'd know when to stop, but we don't. So the obesity epidemic or pandemic, becoming a pandemic now, but definitely an epidemic in many countries, shows actually that human beings have lost their way completely. If there's one thing that shows it, it's obesity. It's a very simple measure to look at. An animal doesn't know when to stop eating. An animal doesn't know when to stop feeding itself. Its basic impulse to eat, it doesn't know when. Or doesn't know when to stop sleeping. It sleeps too much. Or doesn't know when to stop its activity. It works, and doesn't sleep and rest enough. That means we've lost the plot, basically. And this is how we disconnect from our own essence in the most fundamental way. Most fundamental way. Forget about how you think, bad thoughts and stuff. It all starts and ends with this conduct. So the way to cultivate our essential relationship with the absolute or the base, because it's unknowable, ungraspable, is to look at us as the endpoint of the manifestation of the natural laws and act like it. Act like we are the manifestation of those natural laws, right? As much as we can. And we can extrapolate that and talk about that ad infinitum, ad nauseum. And we will in the questions. It's important to get out there. Not really ad nauseum. We kind of really need to do it. So to fall out of the harmony with the greater forces of the universe, the arising energy cycles of nature, puts us in conflict with the energy that should be nourishing us, should be giving us health, should be giving us mental and spiritual well-being. We experience burnout. We experience adrenal failure, thyroid problems, exhaustion, lack of interest in life, lack of meaning in life. You know, it's a really interesting problem we're having now. It's this despair is probably like a number one modern disease, if you want to put it into one category. We lose our essential nourishment from this essence experience that we're supposed to be having coming from the base, which is maintained by appropriate conduct, right? And when we lose that conduct, we lose that nourishment, and then we feel like we're losing. We're at a loss. We need something from the outside. And this is the beginning of all host of compulsive, addictive patterns that are psychologically, emotionally driven, but coming from a deep spiritual disconnection from the base through poor conduct. Too much entertainment, too much food, too much drug, too much, everything. This is actually where it comes from. So this is not my idea. So if you're saying, oh, Dharma, you're such a bummer when you get on here and you teach this traditional stuff. These are all your ideas, right? You're just a cranky old disciplined kind of guy. Well, all that last stuff might be true, but it's not coming from me. This is from the ancients. This is from the masters. You can read it in any ancient text. You can receive it in oral tradition from your teachers. if you have an oral tradition that you belong to, this is what they'll teach you, how to conduct yourself so as not to cut yourself off from the forces of nature, from your base, from your absolute nature, actually. Okay, so therefore, synchronizing and harmonizing with the laws of heaven and nature, heaven and earth, through the coordinated actions of our body, speech, and mind becomes the number one practice to align yourself with the absolute. So you can practice absolute view and relative view at the same time. More on that later. So I'm just telling you right now, if you haven't started it, start this one right away. Yeah. Be in congruity, in harmony with the absolute, with the base. And so doing that, we do that through slowly, compassionately, gently, working with our activities of body, emotion, energy, speech, and mind to harmonize with what is natural for us. And of course, that begs a huge question. People panic. I don't know what's natural for me. Yeah, right. One of the times I was giving a talk on yoga and Tai Chi and stuff like that, like body methodologies for spiritual cultivation. Everybody was getting hung up on a lot of the details about Tai Chi and yoga and stuff. I said, look, one of the major things these systems are trying to teach us is simply how to move naturally again. We don't know how to move naturally. We're so tight because we do activities of the body in certain grooves and we don't really expand those grooves. We don't act like an animal in nature, expanding all their ranges of motion, stretching naturally all the time and moving naturally. And, so yoga was created to make all those channels, all those movements and expressions open up so the base could feed us. We could find our natural appetite again, right? Same thing with Tai Chi, blah, blah, blah. So how do we find what we really need? And this is where people usually go towards medicine. They'll go towards a very well-developed system like Ayurveda, trying to look at their constitution. Well, what is the fundamental composition of the 5 elements in my constitution, in my body constitution, in my mental constitution, in my spiritual constitution? And how can I line all of them up? First, do I know what they are? How much earth element do I have? How much water? How much wind? How much fire? How much space? And how do they line up in each one of those levels, right? So that's where people usually go, to medicine to look for that. But there's many ways to look into our nature, many ways to look into our constitution. This is what we go through in the foundations course or entering the stream, where if you do the course live in person, we do typing. I don't do the typing aspect on the online version because it's too difficult. You need to interact with people to help them see their type and not be led down the wrong path by getting the wrong type for themselves. But when we do this in person, we spend a fair bit of time typing, because if you understand your type, then you're going to be able to nourish yourself correctly with activity. What type of workout is best for me? Or physicality in general, maybe not even a workout, maybe walking is best for you. What type of, emotion should I be cultivating or watching out for that upsets my elemental balance or so forth? This kind of thing is very important. What kind of bhava should I hold? And what kind of spiritual practice should I take that balances me and so forth? So sometimes people enter through this lens, and I think this is the way to go. There's medical, there's spiritual models, but we're trying to type ourselves, right? So to learn how to synchronize our conduct, we have to first know our constitution, our constitutions, and once we know those constitutions, we can then start to apply some methodologies. We can attune ourselves to the natural cycles too. It's not just inner that we want to attune to. This is a big problem with renunciate kind of traditions like monks and so forth, or heavy meditators, They really think that it's all about them. It's another form of egotism. We're sitting in this vast energy, and this vast energy is also a live matrix that arises from the absolute, from the base. And to some degree, it's all sentient as well in our understanding. We have to harmonize ourselves and become congruent with these greater cycles as well. So we have to be harmonizing with our own cycles, with our own natural appetites, which we find through our constitution. But then we also have to harmonize with the greater cycles outside of ourselves, which is, really important, because It's huge around the world is huge around us. How do we do that? We can't see these unseen forces. Well, try to make your house as Vastu or Feng Shui perfect as you can without getting crazy about it. Try to understand that there are cycles of energy and time that do exert effect upon us that we can use and flow with, right? In the relative practice, we're going to use them to our advantage. In the absolute practice, absolute viewpoint, we're going to flow with them. Okay, so I recommend looking at the Panchanga in the Indian-based traditions. I don't know what it's called in Tibetan, if there is such a thing. But this is a book that is compiled, and you can buy it online if there's a good one. And it can tell you each day of the year and time of the day what type of energy, what type of cyclic energy or forces of base or absolute are expressing into the world at this time. And if you know your own personal astrology, your own personal constitution, spiritually, energetically, 5 elements, whatever, you can see how it meshes with it or is, conflicting with it, and you can take the right strategy to flow with it at the time, so that you're staying in flow with heaven and earth all the time, to whatever you can, to whatever degree you can. So get a hold of a Panchanga, get a hold of a Tangshu, and start to see what energies are coming through each day, each hour, and just notice. It's one of the beautiful things I loved about when I studied acupuncture way back when I was going for the California State Board of Acupuncture, studying with Dr. Bob Levine, who is a savant of Chinese medicine, and he worked in Berkeley, California, and a Dzogchen practitioner, a high-level Dzogchen practitioner. And what I thought was really cool was he opened up this idea of the open points, and I never heard of this before. And there's this theory in some Chinese medicine circles that based on what energy is occurring in that Chinese hour, certain points or a point are open and the most able to be affected and the one that will cause the most effect in the body for health, which makes sense based on how we're trying to merge our smallness with this macro nature. The open point is said to be like the most path of least resistance into that congruity between nature and human. So there are many ways all day long that we can have open point therapy for ourselves. When you get the sense that you should sit back and relax, don't do the extra half-hour work, but I could just finish if I do another half hour. Don't push like that. The half hour is still going to exist after or before, but what you're doing is ruining your ability to rest at that moment, right? Don't stay up too late. When you know it's time to go, go. Why stay up? All these different things we should do very simply. Don't overeat. It's so simple. But, anyway, try to attune your own physical, energetic, and spiritual constitution to the outer world's constitution as well. This is another very important practice on the absolute level. And this is where a lot of people say, oh man, I can't handle this tantric yoga stuff. It's got too much technology, too much detail. Okay, then don't. You got another practice coming up we'll talk about where you can deal with it that way and it's not a problem. But this is really, kind of important in the absolute view, because when we look about view, method, and fruit, right? We start talking about view, method, and fruit. In the absolute view, the fruit of the whole path, view is your orientation, the philosophy that guides it, the teachings, whatever. Method are the exercises, sadhanas, and practices you're doing, and fruit is the result, some kind of enlightenment, right? Well, in the absolute view, the fruit is conduct. You're like, what? Yeah, the fruit is conduct. In other words, enlightenment, how do we even know what enlightenment is or realization is? It has to be expressed. It's expressed as a conduct. So then the fruit is conduct. Therefore, conduct expresses the view, and therefore it really gets back to the view is conduct. Like, whoa, the view is conduct. So in other words, as soon as you dive into exploring your natural appetites and not resisting what is natural for you in your own being and in relation to heaven and earth, you're going to be right in the fruit. You'll be, in the absolute sense, you're right in the fruit of the practice. Now, we're going to talk about this later, but you can do that while you're still practicing on the relative level, being pragmatic, We'll talk about how that works later. So if our conduct and view are seamless, if you conduct yourself informed by the view, you're already in the fruit of the path. This is a very important point from absolute view. And if we're in relative view, we should still remember this all the time. It'll keep us from getting anxious about, oh my God, I fell out of base, out of the absolute. Oh my God, I fell out of Shiva essence or Buddha nature. Oh my God, I got to get back in. There's no in or out. As long as you're cultivating your conduct, you're in it. That's it. The truth is you're in it all the time. That's part of the absolute understanding as well. Okay. Anyway, this has been on conduct as your number one practice for cultivating absolute, right? You're not creating anything by doing that conduct. You're diminishing, obstructing conduct to find what is natural. Okay, that's the key. This is your orientation on conduct. So then the next one is non-conceptual meditation. The fantastic practice of non-conceptual meditation, which is to directly relax and be the base to whatever degree you can. Those instructions are given every time we do the Mind of Shiva retreat in meditation every year. We offer the Mind of Shiva retreat, and we offer techniques of meditation from the 4 levels of meditation on the way of meditation. So in the Mind of Shiva, we offer the non-conceptual meditation instructions, and we do sit and practice non-conceptual together during those days. Non-conceptual meditation goes with the absolute because it's non-effort. It doesn't mean you lay down and go to sleep. That's actually a state of consciousness. We don't want that. What we're trying to do in non-conceptual meditation is host everything that occurs, all the states of consciousness while we're awake, that is, while we're meditating. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, whatever, but be unaffected completely by them, but completely aware and engaged of them without any activity of awareness, without observing thoughts. This is not vipassana. It's very different than vipassana. Abhinavagupta gave the instructions, take everything, I forgot him in the moment. Take nothing. Thank you, honey. Take nothing, leave everything. Take nothing, leave nothing, be with everything as it is. So you go into the absolute and you can't talk right. So take nothing means don't grasp at anything. Leave nothing means don't resist and push away anything or think there's anything to renounce. Be with everything as it is means don't try to change anything. Just be with everything. And not really as it is outside yourself. Don't think about inside or outside. None of these distinctions. So Abhinavagupta gave these instructions on non-conceptual meditation, or was said to have given these instructions. And they're very good. So this is a way of looking at non-conceptual. You just sit down, you hold the proper position that keeps the channels as open as possible. It's a natural position. And it's upright, it's erect, it's relaxed. You relax your breath, you let go. But anyway, those instructions will come during the way of meditation retreats or in Mind of Shiva. But just know that non-conceptual meditation is one of the best ways to cultivate the absolute experience of your essence, nature. Yeah, that's it. Okay. It's giving a voice to the stillness and quietness of your essence in your life, which needs to be done on a regular basis. We lose our minds, actually. Recognition is another way. You can't say it's a way of cultivating it, but it relates to the base or absolute now, so we'll talk about it. In these traditions, it's considered vital for every person who is in these traditions and practicing these traditions to receive a direct introduction to the base, a direct introduction to your essential nature. And you receive that via a qualified teacher. You're introduced. In other words, we said earlier, it takes Shiva to recognize Shiva. So there's something interesting about how a teacher can speak to you about the teaching, describe it to you in a way where you're able to self-recognize. And this is called introduction, direct introduction. So we get the direct introduction, maybe we don't recognize, and we wait 3 or 4 more years and the teacher tries again with us later. That's okay too. But this is one of the methodologies, one of the expressions of the base, is that it seems to be, from a macro view, that beings who reside in base experience in their absolute and live from that place while living in the pragmatic dualistic world are able to introduce other people to this experience through their words, through explanations, actually. And you may have read it in a book a million times, heard it from a million teachers, but all of a sudden it hits home. So there's a sense that you recognize. So you're introduced to the base, introduced to the absolute view, which is you, your nature. And then you self-recognize. That would be the next step. Ah, that's who I am. Boom. A full identity, 100% seamless identity with that as who you are, not looking at it at all. It is you. That may or may not happen when you're introduced. Then you self-confirm. Yes, that's it. That's it. And I don't have any doubt. So I remain without doubt. So after that, you just want to remain without doubt. Now, this is the classic way that direct realization functions, the whole path of direct realization. This is called the way of the Vajra. We don't advertise it or talk about it on the Trikamana Siddha Yoga website or Facebook group because it can't be manipulated. It's the base. It's the absolute. The absolute can't be manipulated or, made into a subject-object energy transmission experience. It can't be made into a practice. It's a spontaneous event outside of space and time, and that's why it qualifies for absolute view. Okay, so, and the way of the Vajra is a relationship we have with our heart teacher, where that is the only ground of our training. Not just the primary ground, because there's the primary ground of everybody's training, that we are the absolute base. We know this. But the way of the Vajra, which I don't talk about much, but here we have to, is a way where it is the fabric of that experience, where each moment we're triggered into a deeper experience of our essence, of our nature, simply by being in that relational dynamic of the mirror and the reflected becoming one. That's the mirror essence of the mirror consort path as well. So if you want something like the way of the Vajra, and you can't have access to your teacher all the time, your heart teacher, and maybe you don't have the aptitude for way of the Vajra, very few people do, then way of mirror consorts is quite good for this too. Okay. All right. So remaining in your experience of your nature, recognizing your true nature takes view training, which is kind of paradoxical. It takes some relative training to get to the absolute. We have about 4 minutes left or so in that hour, 5 minutes left in that hour. Let me see if we can get through about a little bit more, and then we can cap it and start to relative next time. We can do question and answer, and then we'll do relative next time in detail. The fourth methodology that I want to give you is, or fourth thing we want to say, about this, is that incorrect theories of base as only practice or realization are quite, they can be quite an obstruction. Okay, I know it makes sense to people when you go and you read about these types of philosophies, or you listen to these teachers that can be very convincing, talking online about how you're the base already. So if you're the base already, there's nothing it needs to do. There's nothing you can do to recognize your base. It just has to be recognized. Forget about meditation, forget about yoga, forget about, But this is only one perspective, a very narrow perspective, and it's not actually pragmatic or realistic. So theories of the base as the only practice or realization necessary are just meant to trigger you out of your ambition, basically. Vedanta and Abhinavagupta style Kashmir Shaivism, things like that, it's very strictly applied, right? Abhinava will say many, many times that all the yogas are useless. And same thing in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, the original Advaita Vedanta. But that you can't recognize the base or your own essence through strenuous effort. And that's absolutely true, but only one part of the picture. Like I said, Shiva recognizes Shiva via Shiva. It's true. Your little mind can't do it. But there's much more to it than this. And we'll get to that in the relative, where we have to set up the proper spiritual environment for recognition for it to occur. So they are related. They can't be uncoupled really in any real sense. And when teachings are given like this, it's only meant to be taken as something that moves you out of excessive ambition or strenuous effort, which distances yourself from the absolute and turns what cannot be an object into an object, okay? The fifth point, inborn aptitude. Some people can cultivate the absolute directly. They qualify for way of the Vajra. We covered this already. They don't need or desire anything more, you know. Now, a quick way for you to just, a very quick way to check in and see if this is you. You already have, you're not developing, you already have naturally appropriate conduct. Boom, that's a big one already. Number two, you can sense your inherent connection. You can sense your inherent connection to the absolute base already. It's not that you sense it on and off. It's always there. It's an abiding reality of who you are. You don't suffer. You don't suffer. When emotion comes, when bad situations happen, you don't have to rectify. So in other words, you never have to rectify. This is when direct realization method is for you. You don't react emotionally. You don't chase any desires or ambitions. You realize that everything is already fulfilled spontaneously within yourself. Okay. Those are super sattvic people who are super rare, like super, super rare. So good luck with that one. If that's you, great for you. Then you don't need this Facebook group or this thing. But for everybody you know around you who's suffering, recommend it to them. All of us other normal mortal folk have to work really hard to realize our inherent connection to the base. Okay. So that's the teaching on the base. And next class, we'll do the teaching on the relative. And then we're going to put together how we work the base and the relative together. But today, are there any questions? We have half hour now. Are there any questions in that regard? Do I scroll here? Okay, let's see. No, it doesn't look like there's any. Back in 2008, the experience of true nature opened up. It lasted for around 10 days. Since then, lots of short openings happened. How can a glimpse open to become a constant living reality? How can a glimpse open? Okay. So that is the complete teaching of the next class on how the dualistic and the relative and the absolute work together. So I know it's going to be hard to hold back those kind of questions right now. I think that's Faisal. So just hang in there with me, brother, because it will come. If I give it away now, it'll be a little bit too much ahead of time. Basically, I did say how, well, yeah, let's leave it for later. It's true. We all get many of these awakenings, but we have to know how to stabilize them and turn them into the new fabric of our reality. We'll do that at the next one. So save that one. I might forget that when we come back for next class, maybe resend it. But it is a good question. It has to be answered. It's one of the main questions we're going to talk about. Anuloma, Nicholas Morta. Hello, Brazil. Is Anavamala one of the main obstacles to remain in contact in base? In contact. Intact, do you mean? Is Anavamala one of the main obstacles that remains intact in the base? No, that wouldn't be right. Is Anavamala one of the main obstacles to remain in contact in base? Anybody know what that means in the room? Anybody get a sense of that? Anuloma, if you're still there, write back to us and clarify that. We're not sure what that means. Anybody else have a question want to come in?
Like maybe is that to you just got it clarified.
I did where? It just came in?
Obstacle to remain connected to the base.
It didn't come into me.
Okay. Is Anavamala one of the main obstacles to remain connected with the base?
Oh, is Anavamala one of the main obstacles to remaining connected to the base? Yes. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't figure that out. Absolutely. Anavamala is the obstacle to remaining connected to the base. But when people say in initiation, your Anavamala is destroyed completely, that should be understood. That's in this absolute teaching today. So if you go back to classic ancient Shaivism that started, around Kashmir, Central Asia, and spread all over the place. And if you go into the Dzogchen teachings that I just explained, where we talk about being introduced to your nature, recognizing it, self-confirming it, and remaining without doubt in that state, they're all coming from the same perspective. Where in the ancient Shaivist yoga tradition, for example, you were said to receive initiation that destroyed the Anavamala forever. And what was that? Well, during the initiation, the teacher is introducing you to your nature. They're describing to you exactly what the absolute is, and that you have no separation between you and that absolute. A deity's yantra is on the floor that you're sitting in the middle of, And you're receiving that initiation of that Day's yantra so that you can identify deeper. So the mind can dissolve into your essence, your absolute. The energy dissolves in with the mantra, with the speaking, explaining it. And then your body absolves into it too by letting go of the sense of it being separate from your nature, from nature in general. So all these abhishekams or empowerments are being received during this initiation. But the key thing is that the upasaka who becomes an initiate receives the direct introduction to their nature by the Shaiva guru explaining their nature to them. And that is actually what liberates the Anavamala. Not the magic wand of the guru, not so-called Shaktipata that you, don't get me started. You know, you see people paying for Shaktipata, going on retreats where people say, I'm going to give you Shaktipata. Impossible. Impossible. You can give some kind of prana to somebody only. But why even bother doing that? Because Shaktipata is the base itself and the Sambhogakaya, the natural arising energy of the base. So this natural arising energy of the base is not able to be manipulated because it's not an object, right? So when you're explained, when your nature is explained to you by the teacher during initiation, that's the liberation, the rupturing of the Anavamala. Because the Anavamala is not an object either. It's not real. It's a misunderstanding. And then in that moment, you have this opportunity when you're initiated to retain in essence, to remain in essence. But that has to be because you were brought into such a deep experience of it, you had no doubt. And that goes back to Faisal's question, how do we get no doubt so we can remain in that state? All to come next class. Okay, so this is good. So in the case of where the person is initiated, they have intellectual apprehension of their base, of the absolute at least, of their Shiva nature, nature of mind, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it. They now can practice with that orientation and they can adhere to that view. So if you have the absolute understanding, you've received that transmission, then you adhere to that view while you practice everything in a relative level. Again, more on that next time. Okay, we got that one straight. That's a really good question. Hopefully a good answer. Am I in this? Clicked in? It's not scrolling. Here we Victor. Okay, Victor, let's see. Just a comment. I have found human design by Ra Uru Hu, whoever, I don't know what that is, as a helpful tool to understand your own energies or design, and can be helpful as Panchanga for daily energies. Just an alternative to astrology. Oh yeah, I know this thing, right? I learned about it in Chiang Mai when I was living there. One of my ex-wife's friends was deeply into it and explained the whole system to me, and she was a teacher of it and all that. Yeah, these systems are good. I'm not getting behind this system just yet, human design, Ra, Victor, because it may be good. It may be good. It may be useful. I'm sure I saw some things that I thought were pretty good about it. I saw that it was definitely trying to combine astrology, Enneagram, a number of things that I've learned along the way. I think it's just too new to be the main guiding principle. If you're using it as your main thing, if you're giving sessions, more power to you. I'll send people to you, no problem. I'm not putting you down that way. But I really think things like this, where we're looking into the nature of the universe and trying to connect someone to it, it's a heavy responsibility for any system or person to be doing for someone else. I'd want to see at least 100 years of it functioning before it does, before I can put my weight behind it fully, I think. Call me old-fashioned, but I want to see results, a lot of them first. So yeah, I hear you. Yeah, there's a lot of other systems I didn't mention. There's the Zhou-Yi. I often use the Zhou-Yi for myself. My wife and I use it all the time. I was initiated into the Taoist system of Zhou-Yi. I was initiated into many other systems of Omanology. So yeah, there's many, Victor. I hear you for sure. Thank you for sharing that one. And Suka City, Karen. Hello, Brazil again. Have you ever met someone with inborn aptitude? Why would then even need a teacher? Why would them incarnate? Okay. Have you ever met somebody with inborn aptitude? I mean, I think you're talking about the inborn aptitude to recognize their base right away, to be one with the absolute right away, the Vajra path, the Vajra way of the Vajra. I actually have met someone like that. And why would they need a teacher? They actually have this aptitude. This is the point. It's potential, right? They meet the teacher and it's like, it just gets catalyzed and boom, they're in it. Even from the stories of Swami Shivananda, I've got to say, I think he had this aptitude from the very beginning, this potential from the very beginning. And he pretty much taught himself. I mean, he learned from a lot of other people, but he pretty much had recognition of his nature when he was very young. And then when he met his teacher, it all just came together. Boom. And he met him for a brief moment in a market up in the mountains. And then he gave him initiation, gave him a name within minutes, and he was on his way. And I don't think he ever saw the guy again. And then he was part of the Saraswati order. Boom, 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 just like that. Because this amazing yogi recognized that Swami Shivananda had this innate capacity, was already manifesting this kind of absolute experience. And boom, gave him that initiation. Boom, boom, there he was. So I didn't meet Swami Shivananda. He was gone before I was happening on the planet. But why would you need a teacher? Because there is some kind of spark that has to happen. Why would they incarnate? Because you might be confusing this inner potential for a way of the Vajra to mean that the person is fully realized. Sukha Siddhi, they're not fully realized. They simply have a very, very refined experience already within them of the base and only have a little bit to be let go of. And it's called the way of the Vajra because it's immediate and it's boom. It's, the Vajra means immediate presence, basically. Boom. So that's why it's called that. So yeah, they have to incarnate, still need to meet a teacher and do some stuff.
Next question,
Faisal again. Would you say that liberation is a combination of grace, practice, and good karma, or is more to it? We see a lot who practice all their life and have good karma, but no liberation. I was just telling Suki the other night, I was going to write a book. Many times I've written notes on this subject. I have to edit it down into a book. I wanted to call it like the essential keys of liberation, because what you're asking here, Faisal, I think is a really important point. What are the essential keys to liberation? Yes, grace. So grace, I want to call, when we say grace, if we're influenced by Christianity, it has this sense that there's some God that's directing some energy towards you because you deserved it or something, or you didn't deserve it, whatever. But somebody or something orchestrated this thing happening to you. It's volitional, right? But the way we understand grace in our traditions is that it's not volitional. It's an undescribable, unreasonable, uncaused relaxation instantly, immediately back into your own state of essence presence. And no one can say why it really happened. That's the kind of weird thing. Except you can't make a one-to-one correlation, Faisal, and everybody's listening. This is important, except to say there are far more people, and this is a fact, that do realize their true nature, relax into the base, and become enlightened and realized, who come from working in the relative teachings, relative practices for a long time with another ingredient, key ingredient, the correct view, the correct orientation of the absolute and the relative connection within the absolute. The people who work that way have much more ability to recognize their nature. There are many, many more of them who do recognize their nature than the ones who just, it happens to spontaneously outside of that context, outside of that matrix. So there is a lot to it. A practice, yes, is a part of that. Good karma, not necessarily important, actually. A deep desire to liberate, more important than good karma. A really deep burning desire to liberate, something that says, this is my main priority. I'll take care of the kids. I'll make money for the family. I'll do whatever I need to do. I'll mother them. I'll father them. But I'll be a good citizen to the country I live in, whatever. But this is what's most important. This is what I will live and die for. That's really it. So yeah, more of that exactly again in the second part.
I have a question.
Yes. So Kalia has a question.
So holding this absolute view as a practitioner working in the relative.
Yeah.
On an integration level, how much does it need to be like consciously evoked throughout the day, or is it better not to be so involved because it's still a concept at that point? Like how do you
So-
work with that first thing of the view?
Start with again the first part.
Just on an integration
Yeah.
level.
So on an integration level, she's asking on an integration level as a yogini or yogi, how often should you be re-invoking this state? All right. Is that what you're asking?
How often and how so? Are you
How often and how to?
like a conceptual?
Okay. So how often, if I'm in a relative practice, I'm not realized, that's most of us in that condition. how often do I invoke the absolute state? And how do I do that so that I don't turn it into a new concept or an object, or make it feel like it's something outside that I have to jump into, penetrate into. Here's the base. I just remembered it. Let me jump back into it, or let it penetrate me again, like as if it's coming into me. Because in the old world of tantric yoga, they used to feel that the base penetrated them. They called it avesha, penetration, actually. And it was based on the old trances they used to have when they were shamans. So early tantra was dualistic and trance-based. And a lot of that early terminology and idea continued all the way along into modern tantric yoga. But it's not accurate. It's not correct. In non-dual tantric yoga and meditation, both Shaivist and Tibetan, etc., and Chinese, in non-dual yoga and meditation, the absolute is with us all the time. It is us. It's not something that penetrates us. It's something that we wake up to the reality of. And it can be quite an ordinary awakening. It doesn't have to be this huge Shaktipata, Kundalini, everything shaking. And for 5 days, I was in a fever and sweats. And, there's a lot of that going on. And it's really kind of weird. It doesn't really have to happen like that. So what do we do all day long to reinvoke this base experience that we are? First, we have the attitude of being gentle. Invoke it gently. Like when you go to handle something that's very refined and delicate, like our experience of our essence, if you manhandle it, you break it. So if you try to radically reinvoke it with strength, you push it away. You make it an object. Second thing is, how many times should you reinvoke it? Every single time you remember that you're not in the base. So every single time that you remember, you recall, not in the base. You're supposed to reinvoke right in that moment. So you could ritualize it if you want to. I used to study with one teacher who had people, when they would forget in the moment, they would spit on the ground, stamp their foot, turn around and say something, make a saying up about being in the base. So it would become logged into their programming, to stay in the base. But it's not necessary. It's fine that they did that, but it's not necessary. So basically, this is our orientation. We are the view. We are the base. We should be in this all day long. And that pro forma of how actually to work from that view, I'm going to give in the next class. Suffice to say right now, every time you realize that you're in dualistic mind, every time you realize the mind is running with thoughts and you're in those thoughts, you're in those emotions, you're in that, you forgot the bigger view, just the great mantra, in Sanskrit, second vowel, is just pure impulse. Like the immediacy of presence is the and the is the pervasive bliss and ecstatic nature of it, right? Ananda Shakti, right? So we reinvoke the and that's why we do that mantra sometimes to help us remember it. And if that mantra helps you remember and dissolve back into it, great. But if just remembering is enough, that's enough. So when you lose it and you remember that you didn't, then you simply remember. You relax, you reinvoke, and there's really, the least you do, the better. But the soft and gently you are, the better. But sometimes we need to stimulate it a bit more, because sometimes we think it, but still the thoughts are overriding. You know what I mean? You're shaking your head. Sometimes still thoughts are overriding, or stress is overriding, or I'm just not staying in that remembrance. Start animal realming, going unconscious, Manipur chakra shutting down, central channel shutting down. Right. This is why we have second attention, which will be brought up in great detail next time. This is why we have the four immeasurables. Switch to a four immeasurable, equanimity. So now don't say I'm going to be in the base. I'm going to be just 1 degree of separation from the base with a virtue that arises from the base. But if I'm in that virtue without any separation, I'm back in the base. But my mind, which is separated, has to reinvoke that virtue. Then I can relax into the virtue. Because if I just relax into the open-ended space of space, what is that? I don't know. We don't know what that is. So let's say we reinvoke equanimity. It's a feeling base. Don't say equanimity should feel like this, and I would feel like that if I had equanimity, and it looks like that. And just become equanimity, or love, or compassion, or joy, self-joy. Any one of the four immeasurables are good to try. So this is just another way, but it's very practical, because then as you relax into that one equanimity, let's say we move into equanimity. Immediately, as soon as we're losing that thought about equanimity and being the equanimity, we're right back in our base experience. And then integrating is not struggling to hold it. The softness has to be there. Has to be just all around. Like when you put perfume on, it's always there. You walk downstairs and do the wash, it's there. You go upstairs and open the mandala, it's there. You go to bed at night and the bed is there. It's always there, but you don't have to give it any effort or attention. So the absolute should be some kind of like a waft of the most beautiful perfume. Can't see it, can't touch it, can't taste it, but it's always there, but it's softly there reminding. Yeah. Think like that. Okay. Did anything else come in while I was waffling?
Nelson?
Okay. Why am I not getting these? Interesting. Let me see yours. Do I have to refresh somehow? Oh, they slip up out of order sometimes. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry, I missed him. Okay, Nelson. Hello, Nelson, Brazil again. Can art be a tool for practicing and be in contact with the base? This is what I love about our artist, Dinesh, that I try to get all of you guys to commission when you're really serious about one of the images that we have on the other side of the wall, this side, the Shiva side, and you want to use them as a central piece. And right now he's composing a piece for us to use as an altar piece for everybody that has all the main figures that we need on our altar. In his training, he went through the relative practice of learning all the geometry, learning all the forms, practicing them until it's perfect and so forth, refining and refining, connecting to the mantra of the deity, the yantra of the deity, making the deity, and until eventually, while he was painting, he becomes the deity. And then he can relax that experience of how weird it is to be the deity and actually be the deity. And then he's the absolute, because deities are manifestations, pure manifestations of the absolute, right? So yes, art can be this. Or like when I was young, there was a famous Taoist story that my Taoist teachers repeated to me about how if you're going to be a wood carver and make a sculpture, the sculpture pre-exists in the wood. You simply take away the wood that's not needed. That's saying that you're in touch with the laws and cycles of nature and you're bringing out what's already there. It's a beautiful way to say that. And that can happen through art. Beautiful calligraphy is like that. Calligraphy that touches you, and again, watch The Red Violin. Everybody who's never seen the movie Red Violin, put it on your list. It's Corona lockdown. Watch a good movie. The Red Violin, watch the opening scene when the master smashes the violin, and you'll know why. He smashes what looks like a perfect violin. Okay. So, yes, Nelson, art can most definitely be used for that. Okay. Aaron Shaver. Hello, Aaron. Not sure where you're from, but I see you on the group sometimes. Thanks for your submissions. For someone said to have purity of heart, what process is needed to reach the experience of the base? Man, if you have, Aaron, if you have purity of heart, you're already in the base. As was said to me once when I, in my false humility and pride, stood up in front of a group of people and said, every cell of my body, every molecule and atom of my being wants to be with God with no separation whatsoever. Guruji, why can't I find God? Why am I not one with God? And then the Guruji said, really? Every fiber, every essence, every molecule? Yes, so much so. That's every single one. Everyone 100%? Yes, everyone. Well, my dear boy, if that was true, that every molecule and atom of your being and essence wanted to be with essence right now, or was it with essence, you'd be there right now. And I was like, just boom, it cut straight through my mind, right through my false humility. False humility was pride. And I realized, boom. So I'm not saying this is you, Aaron. I'm just saying if someone has purity of heart, like real purity of heart, that purity of heart is something that is based on the absolute. But what someone may think is purity of heart, like a mother who's very pure in their heart attending to their child may think they have unconditional love. It's very common for a parent to think they have unconditional love. But then the child gets older and I want to be, a chiropractor. No, be a medical doctor. It's not unconditional anymore. It's like it's a love of, trying to manipulate you a little bit here or there. But they're great parents. They did a great job. They baked your cookies. They played in the park with you, modeled good behavior for you. But unconditional, that's a high order. So purity of heart with a capital P would mean to be in essence, in your absolute completely. So yeah, you're there already. There's nothing you have to do to be realized when you have that real purity of heart. No process is needed. You're in the base already. But if not, and you have a purer heart than most people, you're that kind of a pure being, you still have two other centers that have to be purified. You have the head center and the moving center, right? The white bindu and red bindu have to be purified as well, not just a blue bindu. So it leaves a lot of work to do in the relative realm, but it's nice when people have a pure heart because if anything, I'll say this, it's a faster entry point. And it has to do a lot with how we're born with our aptitude, actually. Thanks for that question, Aaron. Very good question. Faisal again, did not Ramana and Anandamayi Ma get liberated without an actual physical teacher or even practices? Are these very rare cases? Why? I think Ramana, the research I've done on Ramana says that he did a lot of practice. He just did it alone and didn't have a physical teacher. Anandamayi Ma says herself that she was taught by Shiva directly. And the Shastra of Shaivism, as well as the oral tradition, allows for that. Are these very rare cases? Yes, that's what I've said before. These are super rare cases. Why are they rare? Because they represent the bell-shaped curve, Most of us are in the middle of that bell-shaped curve. Some don't care at all about realization or anti-realization, never get realized in this lifetime. Other people, that's the only thing they have. It's the biggest thing for them. They have the most aptitude, the least resistance. They're going to get it really quickly. The rest of all of us schmucks are in the middle on the bell somewhere like that. It's just rare. It is the way it is. There's no why. There's no unfairness to it, if that's what you're trying to find out. I don't believe in unfairness about aptitude or not. Yep. Okay.
Next 5 are one question.
Next 5 are all one question. I have changed my motives to practice many times. I can look at the past and see how motives were mature, distorted, or Rahuvian. Would you give us a talk about how healthy and unhealthy Enneagram types will have different motives to seek spirituality and talk more about what would be a pure motive? I used to believe my motive was pure. After changing and reassessing a few times, I became able to catch the impurities, and I am left not trusting myself anymore. And it becomes hard to practice sincerely with this feeling. How can I meet again a sense that I am sincerely following the path? All of the 4 are above. Okay. Do you have a teacher? If you have a teacher, trust that that teacher is telling you that you're okay, that you're in the path, that by following the path and practicing, you're in the fruit already to whatever degree you're able. All you need to do is stop stopping yourself. Stop stopping yourself. The correct orientation to practice, correct motive to practice is always first and foremost for every Enneagram type, every elemental type, every deity type, all the type of typings we do, is to always orient yourself towards that you already are the self-perfected reality and potential. And that all you're doing with practice is awakening that potential, deepening that awakening, and stabilizing it moment to moment, which will take you from stage 7 to stage 12 of the 12-stage view. In stages 1 through 6, you rely with great faith, great devotion, great love on your heart teacher's teachings, on your connection to the lineage through the heart teacher. That's why we see in the foundation practice, in the guru position up here, the guru chakra, we see the heart teacher in the form of Machandanata. We don't see the heart teacher in their own physical form. We don't want to get stuck on the person we know. We want to find out the absolute that we don't know, that they represent that we are. Okay, this is very important. So stop obstructing yourself. Just stop. There's nothing to do to stop. Just stop. Trust in the lineage, trust in the teachings, trust in the teacher. Trust that you have been born with the good fate to find the teachings, to be able to reach a teacher who is still able to teach those teachings in a country that's stable enough for you to receive them, where no government is coming around stopping you from practicing those teachings. In a time, in an era where beings exist who are high-level siddhas still. You have to trust all that and take what it is, okay? Everybody has to do that one. That's important. Good. And yes, Enneagram people have motives that are on lower levels, accurately identified as different motives, but we all should be coming from the absolute motive of remembering our own self-perfected essence. That's the ultimate motive. We're already in this. Now, how can I experience it? We're already in this. I trust that I'm in it. How can I continue? This is also connected to levels of Shaktipata, which we'll get into another time as well. So you do sadhana so you can create the environment to get a higher Shaktipata, awakening experience, which then shows you your essence, and then you can reference that all the time. Wonderful. Okay. Oh, you wrote thanks. Okay, so you got it already. I can be quiet. Caroline. Hello. How are you, dear? So Guru Priya, are beings in the mandala pure emanations of the base? So in the mandala, the more central you are, the more they're considered to be essential manifestations of the base without any type of mediation. And we put the guru lineage, lama lineage in the center because we relate to that the most as human beings. It's more powerful for us, connected to our central channel. But then the direct emanation deities, yes, those are emanations of the base. Everything in the mandala is emanations of the base in one way because everything is the base. Every being is the base. Even Hitler was an emanation of the base, right? So the Antichrist, should he or she ever come, is an emanation of the base. Everything is the base, right? But as you get farther out, we get towards, in the big refuge mandala, you have realized yogins. Then we have translators, then we have the yogin practitioners who are committed practitioners, and then the lay practitioners who are just going about it as best they can. So at the level of the realized practitioners, that's the ones who know they are the base and have some degree of being in stage 7, recognition of their base, and are living in that base experience in the mandala. And the other beings are beings that are transitioning, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, you know, like that, and trying really hard. We see that as the refuge mandala. So we take refuge also in the fellow practitioners who aren't realized, just like us. That's another powerful thing, right? We carry each other through because we are one body, we are one mind, we are one intention in the end. It's very powerful. And this internet, like this online, has enabled us to connect all around the world, even in the middle of a pandemic where we shouldn't even be talking to anybody. So it's quite amazing. By the way, if anybody's saying I'm not practicing social distancing, everybody in the house right now has been together from the beginning of this thing with no contact with anybody else from the outside. Okay. How long have you been here, Joanna, in retreat? 3 months now, something like that? Yeah. Okay. Huh? No, just in case, you know, social warriors today. Oh, you referred to people in the room there. What are you doing gathering? You're going to spread this thing. I'm just going to preempt it because it gets crazy out there. Faisal, is a still mind, we got in right on the wire, 129. Is a still mind a byproduct of liberation? I hear famous teachers say that their mind is not still, but they're liberated, which does not sound right. This is a great question and something to explore in reality if you can make it to our mind of Shiva. That's a really great way to understand this. This leads into a whole bunch of teachings, which are reserved for what in Kagyu, Tibetan tradition, and Shaivism, oral tradition I received, are called Mahamudra, where Mahakumbhaka stills the mind. This may give you an insight to it, Faisal. Mahakumbhaka stills the mind, and yet you're not fully realized, maybe. But then with that still mind of Mahakumbhaka, thoughts and feelings can still occur, but they are experienced completely different. They're experienced as seamlessly one with the base, not as a distraction, right? So anyway, more of that. It's a great question. I love it. It's a huge thing, and I could go on about it forever because I'm a meditation fanatic. And this is what we really have to understand about meditation. Is a still mind a byproduct of liberation? A still mind can be had at any moment by anybody who is in a liberated state, meaning stage 7 or above. Yet, the mind will still function and will still produce echo karmas all the way up until stage 10. At stage 10 and 11, we do a transition. In 11, we become the bindu point of the universe. Not the 3 bindus, the bindu. the center of the yantra, that one point of all that is all, coming transitional point between manifestation and the pure base. That's when you could say the still mind has no content whatsoever at that point only. So we're still going to have content. It's about how we relate to it from there on. Okay.
One came in through Facebook.
Oh, through Facebook, one more question. Okay.
When our dualistic desires subsided, when naturally, and I don't chase achievement, how do I know that I'm not just lazy? How do I know that it's me abiding in my natural state? From Anna Walting.
Okay. So when dualistic desires abide or resolve naturally, is that right? How do I know the difference between a dualistic desire going away and me just being lazy, right? Okay. So that's more of a question for the relative. I'm going to keep you hanging, Anna. Please come back and give us that one for the relative, because that's talking directly about the relative, and I'll keep it for then, okay? Sorry to disappoint. Maybe it'll make more anticipation for next time. Okay. So that was a great class, everybody. We have part 2 coming up in a few days on the 15th, I believe. Let's chant Shantipat mantras and share the benefit of our experience of widening our knowledge and our sense of compassion and wisdom and connection to all beings, and share the merit of everything we've expanded and learned today with all beings who might still be suffering. Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritam gamaya, sarvesham swastir bhavatu. Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu. Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu. Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Varadhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiyamamritan. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om. Blessings of long life to our wisdom masters, the great gurus and lamas. May they continue to guide us and teach us. May we continue to receive their blessings of protection, their constant blessings of empowerment into our true nature. May we have that perfect conduct of a realized one. If not, may we strive to give it to the world as our contribution. May we realize our true nature to be that self-perfected essence already within us. May we rupture that potential seed into full fruition of a beautiful lotus flower. May the fragrance of that flower benefit all beings. In wisdom and compassion, may we live every moment for the benefit of all. Tatastu. May it be so. We are that. Okay, bye-bye. See you next time. What do I hit? End stream? And now the end is near.